This is Athanasius Kircher on interpretation of the sayings of Orpheus. Chapter 4 from Class 3, Sphinx Mystagoga, from the second volume of his work, The Egyptian Oedipus. I'll read this first in Latin and then circle back and give you a quick, dirty translation. Primus ex Graecia Aegyptiorum discipulus fuit Orpheus. Mose, ut in chronographia nostra ostendimus, uno ferre saeculo recentior. Cadmi et poenicis synchronus, natione Thrax, patria Libetraios, filius Oinagri et Calliopes, ut contradistinguatur illi Orpheo, qui argonautica expeditione ad fuit, eiusque historiam descripsit, et ab eo qui primus paederota tostato teste docuit. Putant non nulli Orpheum Thracium discipulum fuisi lini, quidem contra, verum de his vide quae in obelisco Pamphilio de eotem tradidimus, hoc enim locum tantum ibidem omissa, aducere nobis est animus. Scripsit teste suida triasmus, hoc est de ternario Numero, tametse quidam eostem iovi tragico adscribant, aliasque compositiones quas hierosolicas cosminas neuteuticas vocant, una cum variis sacris discursibus, quos in vigentiquatur libros partitus est, qui tamen aquibustam attribuuntur, Theogniti Thessalo, ab alis Cecropi Pythagorico. Scripsit praeteria de oraculis, quae falso non nulli adscribunt onomacrito, librum quoque de sculptura lapidum, quem et ogdoi contalifon vide lecit ab octaginta diversis lapidibus, de quibus in eotem mentio sit nuncubat. Praeteria librum charismatontas hygeas, gratiarum actiones de sanitate, quem librum Themocles Syracusanus et Periginus Milesius, sicuti librum de Crateribus Zophidis sui juris faciunt. Conscripsit porro Thronismos et Bacchicos, descensum ad inferos, pelum et 3.200 versus onomasticos de sacrificiis et immolationibus, catasosticon sive de Verbo Divino, hymnosque complures, qui quidam soli veluti assuementa quaedam extam nobilium mercium naufragio ad nostra usque tempora integri pervenerunt. Fertur denique dictus Orpheus non nullas de cognitione Dei orationes composuisse, in quibus asserebat, in principium aeterem fuisse, immenso cao circumdatum, intra quem et nox et rerum omnium conditarum apparatus conservabatur. Aeterem supremum opinabatur esse incomprehensibilem, summum, antiquissimum, et opificem universi, terram vero invisibilem, quae tandem aetera aperto, diffusisque radiis illustrata omnem mundi ornatum ostenderit. Hanc autem lucem dicebat inaccessibilem, reromnium contentricem, hisce tribus nominibus, Beule, Faus, cae Zoe. Id est concilium lucem vitam nuncupatam, quae tribus primis zephirut, ceter, chokma, et bina, coronae sapientiae et intelligentiae apte respondent. Quae omnia aliunde non habuisse verisimile est, nisi ex Moisis libro, Hebraeorumque quibuscum conversabatur, instructione. Hic itaque Orpheus in Aegyptum est profectus, ut arcanorum divinorum rationem a sacerdotibus, iis temporibus sapientiae et omnis scientiae eruditione conspicuis hauriret. Quae quidem ita profecisse fertur, ut Pausania teste in ultimo Aegyptiorum magus Aegyptius fuerit habitus. Id est humanarum divinarumque rerum absoluta notitia imbutus, unde complura quoque didicit de generatione, de elementi, de unione amoris, quae res singulae in mundo colligantur, de pugna gigantum, de raptu proserpinae, de planctu Osiridis, quae omnia a profanorum notitia symbolicis verborum involucris ita involuebantur, ut cortice dum taxat noto, medulla vero non nisi sapientiae filiis aperta eccesaque foret, quae omnia luculenter ex hymnis eius patent ut iam dicetur. Scripsit autem Orpheus hymnos omnino octagintiquatur, qui numeros innumeris mysteriis refertus. Primo symbolum Dei est, teste Platone in libro de opificio mundi, et hieroglyphicum divinitatis, et omnis perfectionis absolutissimae. Deinde septemnarium mysticum perfecte in se multiplicatum explicatumque in se ipso denotat. Cum enim septem ex quatur et tres constant. Fiat ut ex quatur in tribus ductis fiant duodecim porro septima in duodecim ducta dabunt octagintiquatur, dictum hymnorum numerum. Ut proinde griffis apico mirandulano in conclusionibus suis propositus. Omnibus iam pateat, dum dicit, tantus est numerus hymnorum Orphei, quantus est numerus, cum quod Deus triplex creavit saeculum, sub quaternari Pythagorici forma numeratus, ternarius quidem numerus mundi archetypi, quaternatius mundi elementariis, septenarius vero, siderei mundi symbolum est, unitas enim intelligibilis in se ipsam evoluta, triadem constituit, id est mundum intelligilem. Ternarius in quaternarium evolutus mundeum sensibilem exhibet, externario vero et quaternario mundus sidereus constat. Recte itaque per tribus et septimus Deus triplex creavit saeculum, qui numeri in se origine multiplicati dant octagintiquatur mysteriosum numerum hymnorum Orphei, de quod diximus, sed iam in hymnorum interpretatione aliquod specimem demos. Primus hymnus est votum ad musam, qui ita incipit. Mo thane de mutsae, thue politon prisem ton eocto, hedetue protherereser estina pason. It est, disce iam musae operationem in sacrificis, circa religiosa operationem quidam omnibus praestantior est, etc. Quo sub varis deorum appellationibus varias divinae essentiae in mundum diffusae virtutes et operationes recensentur, ceremonii sacrificiisque, numina placantur, cantu allegorico ad id quod petitur obtinendum trahi putantur. Nequaquagitur quispiam existimet velim, nomina deorum quos in octagintiquatur suis gymnis Orpheus describit, esse falsorum deorum aut cacodaimonum nomina, aquibus non nisi malum tibi policiaris, sed esse naturalium divanarumque virtutum, avero Deo in utilitatem maxime hominum, si eis scire liquerit, mundo distributarum appellationes. Quod enim veteres Hebraei hymnos Davidicos in Cabala, hoc veteres poetae, philosophi et sacerdotes, hymnos Orphei et Homeri ut pote divino numinis afflato inspiratos operare opinabantur in magia naturali. Elucet enim in dictorum hymnorum descriptione mira quaedam analogia virtutum inferiorum cum superioribus, et mediis quibus cum hymni per appositum allegoricarum locutionum contextum respondeant, mirros sibi ex eorum legitima recitatione et ceremoniarum exacta observantia immo infallibile spondebant effectus. Dum enim Saturnum, Iovem, Panna, Mercurium, Bacchum, Neptunum, Plutonem, relinquam deorum, dearumque progenium cantum mystico describit, quid aliud indicat nisi diversas unius Dei in rebus mundanis absconditas virtutes, quibus pulsis malis contradiisque beati efficiamur. Totum igitur secretum hymnorum dependit ab analogia partium mundi ad supremas rerum virtutes, quam qui nesciverit, is in abdito hymnorum Orphaecorum sensu percipiendo nullo prelaborabit. Est enim proprium Aegyptiorum, a quibus Orpheus et reliqui poetae omnia sua hauserunt, aliud sensi per corpoream representationem, aliud mente per allegoricae analogiae contextum exhibere. Nam quid aliud Orpheus per Saturniae unitatis in triadem Jovis, Neptuni, et Plutonis divisionem, per fatalis unitatis in parcarum triadem Cloto, Atropos, lacesim partitionem, et per Veneriae denique unitatis in triadem gratiarum Aglaiae, Thaliae, Euphrosines, sectionem intelligit, nisi triplicem mundum archetypum sidereum elementarum. Quarum priorum Saturnum opinione veterum distribuit tribus angelicis potentiis, coeli, maris, terrae praesidibus ceu curetis. Secundam vero fatalem distribuit tribus parcis, quarum unia perpetuo silat, altera glomerat, tertia fusum scindit. Tertia elementari mundo generationis spherae, eam variis, gratiis concinando, conservandoque praesidet. Videbis itaque apud Orpheum curetas idem esse, quod apud Dionysium Areopagitam potestates, apud Kabbalistas ruach, spiritus angelos apud Platonicos, genios apud Aegyptios, typhonem eundum esse, quem in Kabbala Sabaiel nocturnum daemonium, tenebrarum incolam, semper malis inferendis intentum. Noctem eandem esse apud eundem Orpheum, quod apud Kabbalaeos ein sof, apud Aegyptios Hemphta, apud Platonicos infinitum. Deduces hinc cur opificem mundi nocte de opificio mundi consulentem veteres mystae introduxerint. Aegyptiorum sane dogmatam summa in hac una analogia mundorum praesidiumque varitate consistebat, quas quidem praesides, quicumque praevia expiatione per congruas caeremonias, per rerum mundanarum, teste iamblico, congruam applicationem factas, conciliare nocent eos iam deorum consortio beatos, portamque felicitatis nactos putabant. Ut provinde Orpheum hanc magiam non aliunde quam ab Aegyptiis hausisse, et ab hoc Homerum adio certum sit, ut id nulla alia demonstratione egeat, nisi unius doctrinae cum alterius combinatione. Quid hieroglyphicae statuarum obliscorumque inscriptiones aliud sunt, quam hymni quidam taciti ad deorum virtutes influxusque attracendos ordinati, verum haec omnia sua loco et tempore fusse ostendentur. Orpheus itaque idem nobis verbis allegoricis quod Aegyptii hieroglyphicis explicat. Ita ut per deorum nomina quibus hymni dedicantur, nihil aliud nisi intellectuales mundorum praesides, per ornamenta veros eo instrumenta deorum, variosque corporis habitus, locorumque varium situm, quibus eos describit, nihil aliud quam varias eorundem operationes et virtutes in singulis mundi membris eluscentes indicet. Peritus vero sturgacem, manna crocum libanotum smyrnam papaver, coiterasque suffimentorum aromatum seminumque species, uniquique nomini appropriatas, nihil aliud nisi ceremonias, expiationes, animique dispositiones, ad Deum qui cantantur, attracendum requisitas mysticae designet. Primo enim introducit Neptunum quadica vectum, quae quidem aperte indicat id quod Aegypti hieroglyphicae per oculum, sceptrum, sautum et serpentum exprimebant. Id est ineffabile nomen Dei, quod universum teste iambico percurrit, et quod forsam ab Trismegisto hauserat, qui eo quod primus nomen Dei ineffabile, quod a primaevis patriarchis dedicerat, sub unitate essentiae, triplici virtutis diffusione coleret. Trismegistus est appellatus, ut suidas docet verbo Trismegistus. In hunc itaque morrem Orpheus Neptunum quadriga vectum adducit sub tribus nominibus Aegyptum, quae sunt nox, coelum et aether. Ita per noctem idem intelligat quod Hebraei per ein sof et keter, id est infinitum et coronam, et Trismegistus per potentiam, quae inter tres personas divinas patri amanti competit. Coelum vero a nocte generatum filio amato, et spiritui daniquo vivifico, et amore omnia connectenti. Aether mundanorum corporum vinculum congruit. Quid porro aliud indicatur per deos particulares, quos in hymnorum principio invocat, nisi divinitatis vis per omnia mundi membra diffusa, variisque operationibus distincta, sed specimem interpretationes hinc apponamus. Primigenito Saturni, soffimentum Smyrna. Primigenitum voco biformem, magnin aethererantem, ex ovo genitum aureis gaudentum allis, tauri clamorem abentem, genus beatorum mortaliumque hominum, inerabilem occultum sonantem ubique lucentum ramum oculorum, qui tenebros excusisti nubem, quoque versum volutus alarum incitamentis per mundum emicantem ducens lucem puram, aquate faneta voco. Atque priapum regem et splendentem circumspectum, sed beate multi consilii habens diversa semina, descente laetus, ad sacrificium sanctum varium orgia discentibus. Per Saturnum innuit mundum intellectualem, qui continet mentes angelicas, puras et ab omni materiae contagione semotas. Hinc prima mentem Platonici vocant regnum Saturni, autoris omnis resurrectionis. Dicitur autem filius terrae et coeli, quia natura angelica, uti anonymus quidam in hunc locum commentator explicat. In primo creationis suae gradu erat quodam modo informis et obscura, expressa per opacitatem terrae, sed conversa ad coelum. Id est verbum divinum, in quo omne sapientiae et scientiae theusauri sunt absconditi, et ad divinae essentiae pulchritudinem, aqua processerat idalium illustrationem radiis perculsa, suam recepit perfectionem, essentia splendore et luminosa pulchritudine amictam. Ego tamen haec clarius sic exponi posse putem, si dicamus angelicam naturam in principio creationis nec dum in statu gratiae confirmatam, nec visione Dei beatam, quodam modo si ita dicere liceat, informem fuisse, id est ad bonum et malum indifferentem, uti ex casu angelorum patet, mox tamen per actum amoris summi in Deum, omnem debitam sibi supernaturalem perfectionem ad Deo accepisse, et sic in gratio aeternum stabilitam fuisse. Dicitur semper vivens, quia in Saturno, id est mundo intellectuali, fontes sunt perpetui, et omnium vitarum exemplaria. Dicitur pater deorum, quia ipse in se continit coelestium corporum ideas, quae a primaevis philosophis dicebantur Dei. Dicitur pater hominum, quia animus humanus unitatis intellectualis vi in ipso radicatur et vivit, habetque communem cum ipso virtutem, operationumque intellectualium fontem et principium iuxta illud Pythagorae. Confide quia in hominibus est divinum semen. Dicitur temporum genitor, quia mundus sensibilis est veluti imago quaedam, et umbra mundi illius intellectualis perpetuit aeterni. Sed explicemus modo Paulo Fusius antiquitatum Orphei hymnum, in quo tamen nihil me expropria sententia asserere, quisquam putet, sed omnia ex mente veterum theologorum, quorum interpretem argumente et opinione. Nam dicitur bifurmis, quia una sui parte ut aiunt vivit uniturque, cum unitate intellectuali purissima in mundo intelligibili, altera mundi gubernatione incumbit. Orthodoxe tamen nullam in Deo divisionem faciunt realem, sed operationem divinam unam atque indivisam dicunt, tum ad infra, tum ad extra. Dicitur Magnus, quia totum universum in se complectitur. Dicitur aethereus seo in aethere commorans, quia spiritum universi ab eo dependere aiunt, quem et aetherem supremum, et divinum spiritum, Dei amore sancto convertentem omnia perperam tamen asserunt. Dicitur natus ex ovo, quia veteres mundum intellectualem ob motus circularis analogiam ovo, quem ad modum fusse in obelisco Pamphilio demonstravimus, assimilabant in quo testa firmamentum, albu gineos humor siderium spacium, vitelus denique elementarum mundum, ut pote in quo semin alium rationum miscela lateat, repraesentit. Cum igitur sensibilis mundus imago quaedam sit mundi intellectualis, apposite magnam naturam, se regiam animam ex ovo natam tradiderunt. Dicitur vocem habere taurinem, eo quod prima huius universalis animae portio perpetuo formatione materiae intentasit, unde ob eandem causam Neptuno, ob summa marini elementi fecunditatem, et perpetuam et generationes omnigenas appetitum. Taurum veteres sacrificabant, ob sonitum etiam maris quem mucutam vocabant, mugitui bovino haud absimilem. Allae aureiae denuntabant dictae animae sapientiam, sunt enim Platone teste aliae hieroglyphicum intelligentiae, ut suo loco dicetur aurum vero pertinet ad supramundanum illum idalium mundum, in quo omnes divitiarum intellectualium thesauri sunt reconditi. Complectitur semen divinum et mortale, quia in illa anima prima, et eius venerando templo omnia, tam colestia, quam elementaria corpora, quantum vis ex se et sua natura corruptionis obnoxiae, aeternae sunt et divina, intellege exemplariter. Dicitur elidere nubes, quia ipsa anima prima in impressione formarum, antiqui illius chaos, caligniosam destruere dicebantur obscuritatem. Expandit vero lucem sanctissimam in mundo quia rerum asse formatarum pulchritudine, animos ad summi boni contemplationem convertit. Dicitur beatus, prudens et abundans consilio, ob contemplationis suae robur, soliditatem et fortitudinem. Abundat semine, ob fecundam rerum quas progenerat, ubertatem, unde et ab eodem caeton allegorion, pan dicitur, et priapus, id est natura universi, et magnum rerum seminarium, ad imitationem Aegyptiorum, qui horum eondam cum pane faciunt. Unde hieroglyphicae eum exhibituri, depingebant sub forma humana, cum sceptro in dextra, symbolo imperii in mundum sub lunarem, quique cum sinistra verenda contractet, ad demonstrandum panspermiam, seu omnia rerum semina in ipso recondita, formarum a materia petitarum unicum et sempiternum rectaculum, juxta haec Orphei verba. Quo omnia producit genitor universi et princeps mundi, lucifer, fructifer, paean, per te fundum aeternum habet terra, et tuae summae potentiae cedit undosum mare. Hinc idem pan sue horus in sae Aegyptiaca civitate sculptus videbatur in praegnandi colosso sub huius modi forma. Dextra lunam flagellare videbatur, et cum sinistra Thyphalium, hoc est veretrum erectum continebat, quoquidem nihil aliud significare volebat, nisi quod ipsa natura universi omnem ab eo recipiat, voi conditatem, quius ope omnia inferiora protocontur. Lunam autem praecipue, tamquam omnium supernorum influxum rectaculum solicitare videtur, ex hoc enim ab humidum calidum mixtum, natura rerum ope seminalium rationem miscelam ad generationem rerum disponit. Verum dehis vide obeliscum Pamphilium, in quo hieroglyphicum panos fusse exposuimus, ute et supra in primo tomo imagines hori. Est itaque Orphaica mythologia hucusque obiter exposita, nil aliud nisi quaedam divinioris philosophiae portio, qualis praeteria sit anima mundi, quae eius obficia, quae rerum naturalium principia, qui motus uberios in theologia hieroglyphica in 11º classe exponetur. Hanc autem philosophiam tamet si corruptam aperte tamen ab Hebraeis se acapisse, sequentibus versibus declarat. Vos qui virtutum colitis, vos ad mea tantum dicta aures adhibite, animosque intendite vestros, contra qui sanctas leges contemnitis hinc vos, effugitet procul hinc miseri, procul ita profani. Tu vero qui divina specularis et alta mente capis, musae voces emplecteret illas aspici in sacra soculis so pectore serva, hoc iter ingressus solilum suspice mundi in genta autorem solum interrumque carentem, quem nos praesenti qui sit sermone docemos. Unius perfectus Deus est, qui cuncta creavit, cuncta foens, at quipse ferens super omnia sense, tantum qui capitur mente et qui mente videtur, qui nullumque malum mortalibus invehit unquam. Quem praeter non est alius, tu cuncta videto, hinc ipsint herris melius quo cernere possis. Hic etenim video ipsius vestigia sortem, hinc que manum video verum ipsum cerne requisit, nequaquam video nam nupibus insedet altis, nemo illum nisa caldaeode sanguine quidam progenitus vidit, quem coelora aurea sedes. Sublimis qui tenet, quios se dextere tendit, oceanad fines, quem de radicibus immis concusicque tremunte montes, nec pondere quamvis immensos sint, ferreque unt, qui culmine coeli, alta collens terris numquam tamen illes et absent. Ipse est principium medeum quoquet exitus idem priscorum nos haec docuerunt omnia voces, quae binis tabulis Deus olim traditit illis. Ubi per Caldaeum haud dubie intelligit vel Mosen, quem sacrae litterae Deo facie ad faciam locutum testantur, vel Abrahamum, quem simili praerogativa ad Deo donatum sacer textus ostendit. Verisimilius tamen est Moisen hinc indicitare, quod et ultimus versus de duabus tabulis satis indicat. Fuerunt porro Orphei hymni in tanta nullo non tempore aestimatione ut picus ausus sit dicere, Orphei hymnos in magia naturali idem efficere, quod in cabala Davidei salmi praestant, atque adio sephiroticae veterum Hebraeorum et Aegyptiorum doctrinae maxime concordant, quem ad modum suo loco dicetur ubi hymnos omnes Orphaicos, nil aliud nisi hieroglyphica, quaedam syntagmata esse hypodecticon comprobabimus. Ut facile apereat ex quo fonte profluxerunt. Ut provende huius tam arduae et sublimis philosophiae amore concitati, omnes sequentium secolorum magni nominis poetae Homerus, Euripides, Hesiodus, caetarisque eium tamquam symbolicae sapientiae exemplar imitare nullo non tempore affectavirint. Inter coeteros autem philosophos Pythagoras, qui ute pleraque ab Aegyptiis et Hebraeis accepit, sic enim ab Orpheo etiam multa fusisse, sequentia symbola abunde demonstrabunt. Athanasius Kircher, from the second volume of the Egyptian Oedipus, Class 3, Sphinx Mystagoga. This is the fourth chapter, Interpretation of the Sayings of Orpheus. The first Greek disciple of the Egyptians was Orpheus, one age more recent than Moses, as we've shown in our chronology. He was a contemporary with Cadmus and Phoenix, a Thracian by birth, a native of Libera, the son of Oenagris and Calliope, in order that he may be distinguished from that Orpheus who was present on the Argonauts' expedition and described its history, and also from he who first taught the pederasty, as Tacitus testifies. Some think that Orpheus the Thracian was a disciple of Linus. Others claim the contrary. However, for the truth of these men, see what we've handed down in the obelisk of Pamphilus. For in this place we're only minded to add what was omitted there. He wrote, according to Suidas, in trilogies, that is, in threes, although some attribute his writings to Jupiter the tragedist, and other compositions which they call hierosolicas, cosminas, neuteuticas, together with various sacred discourses, which he divides into 24 books, of which, however, are attributed by some to Theognis the Thessalian, or by others to Cecrops the Pythagorean. He wrote concerning oracles, which some falsely attribute to Onamacritus. He also wrote a book on the sculpting of stones, which he calls Ogdoikon Talifon, namely from the 80 different stones of which mention is made. Furthermore, the book Charismaton tas Hygeas, Thanksgivings for Health, which book Themocles of Syracuse and Perginus of Miles, just as Zophirus's book on the cups, makes out to be their own. He wrote also the Thronisms and the Bacchics, his descent into the underworld, Pelus, and some 3,200 onomastic verses on sacrifices and immolations, a katazostikon, or about the divine word, and several hymnals, of which some scattered wreckage of such noble goods has come down to our times somewhat intact. Finally, it is reported that the said Orpheus composed a few orations on the knowledge of God, in which he asserted that in the beginning the ether was surrounded by immense chaos, within which was both night and the apparatus of all created things were preserved. He believed that the superior ether was incomprehensible, supreme, most ancient, and the fabric of the universe, but the invisible earth, which at length, illuminated by the open ether and diffused rays, shows the entire ornament of the realm. But this light he called inaccessible, shut off from all things. He called it by 3 names, boule, phios, kai zoe, that is, counsel, light, and fire, which duly correspond to the first 3 Kabbalistic Zephyroth, Keter, Chokmah, and Bina, the crown, wisdom, and intelligence. And so it's probable that he had taken all these things from no other source than the book of Moses and the instruction of the Hebrews with whom he conversed. Here, therefore, Orpheus sets out for Egypt to learn the meaning of the divine mysteries from the priests, who in those times were conspicuous for their wisdom and all the learnings of knowledge. Which learnings are said to have progressed so much that, according to Pausanias, in the last of the Eliacs, he was considered to be an Egyptian magus, that is, imbued with an absolute knowledge of human and divine things, whence he also learned many things about generation, the elements, the union of love, by which individual things in the world are joined together, of the battle of the giants, the abduction of Proserpine, the lamentation of Osiris, all of which were so wrapped up by the knowledge of the profane in symbolical word wrappings that only the outer bark was known, but the inner marrow was only open and accessible to the sons of wisdom, all of which will be revealed in his hymns, as we will now state. For Orpheus wrote a total of 84 hymns. This number, filled with countless mysteries, is firstly a symbol of God, as Plato states in his book on the creation of the world, and is a hieroglyph of divinity and of all absolute perfection. It denotes the mystical septenary, perfectly multiplied and expounded in itself. For, since 7 consists of 4 and 3, it so happens that 4 taken 3 times will become 12, and 7 taken 12 times will give 84, the said number of hymns. So that therefore Gryphus, proposed by Pico of Mirandula in his conclusions, is now more fully clear when he states, "The number of Orpheus's hymns is as great as the number with which God created the triple world, numbered under the form of the Pythagorean quaternary. The third number is indeed the symbol for the archetypal world, the fourth of the elementary world, and the 7th is indeed the symbol of the sidereal world. For the intelligible unity evolved into itself constitutes a triad, that is, the intelligible world. The ternary, developed into the quaternary, exhibits the sensible world, but the sidereal world consists of the ternary and the quaternary. Rightly, then, by 3s and 7s God created the triple world, which numbers multiplied by their origin give 84, the mysterious number of the hymns of Orpheus, of which we spoke. But now let us give some example in the interpretation of the hymns. The first hymn is a vow to the Muse, which begins thus. Learn now, O Muse, the work of sacrifices indeed is the most excellent of all religious work, in which, under various appellations of the gods, the various powers and operations of the divine essence spread throughout the world are enumerated. The deities are appeased by ceremony and sacrifice, and are thought to be drawn by the allegorical songs to obtain what is sought. Therefore I do not prefer anyone to think the names of the gods, whom Orpheus describes in his 84 hymns, are the names of false gods or kakodaimons, from whom you can only expect evil, but that they are the appellations of natural and divine virtues, distributed to the world by the true God, especially for the benefit of men, if they are permitted to know. For just as the ancient Hebrews believed the Davidic hymns in the Kabbalah, so the ancient poets, philosophers, and priests believed the hymns of Orpheus and Homer as inspired by the divine inspiration of the deity, thus operating in natural magic. For in the description of the said hymns there is evident a certain wonderful analogy of the lower virtues with the higher and middle ones, to which the hymns correspond through the appropriate context of allegorical expressions, and from their legitimate recitation and exact observance of the hymns they promised wonderful or infallible effects. For while he describes Saturn, Jupiter, Pan, Mercury, Bacchus, Neptune, Pluto, the offspring of the gods, and the beloved in mystical song, what else does he indicate but the various powers of one God hidden in worldly things, by which we are made happy by driving away evils and their opposites? Therefore the entire secret of the hymns depends on the analogy of the parts of the world to the supreme powers of things, which whoever does not know of them will never be able to perceive the meanings of the secrets of the Orphic hymns. For it is characteristic of the Egyptians, from whom Orpheus and the rest of the poets drew all their ideas, to present one thing to the senses through bodily representation, and another to the mind through the context of allegorical analogy. For what else does Orpheus mean by the division of the Saturnian unity into the triad of Jupiter, Neptune, and Pluto, by the division of the fatal unity into the triad of fates, Clotho, Atropos, and Lacensis, and finally by the division of the Venusian unity into the triad of graces, Aglaia, Thalia, and Euphrosyne, except for the division of the threefold world, the archetypal, the sidereal, and elemental. Of these, the former Saturnian, according to the opinion of the ancients, is distributed among the three angelic powers, the governors or curities of heaven, sea, and earth. But the second fate he distributes to three fates, one of which is perpetually spinning, another gathering, and the third splitting the spindle. The third presides over the elementary world, the sphere of generation, arranging and preserving it with various graces. You will see, then, that for Orpheus the curites are the same as the powers are to Dionysius the Areopagite, for the Kabbalists the ruach, or spirits, among the Platonists angels, among the Egyptians geni, and their Typhon, being the same as the Kabbalists Sabael, a nocturnal demon, an inhabitant of darkness, always intent on inflicting evil. Night, then, is the same with Orpheus as Ein Sof with the Kabbalists, Hymphta with the Egyptians, and infinity with the Platonists. From here you will deduce why the ancient mystics introduced the maker of the world consulting at night about the making of the world. Indeed, the sum of the Egyptian dogmas consisted in this single analogy of the worlds and the variety of their governors. After prior expiation, through appropriate ceremonies, through the application of worldly things, as Iamblichus attests, and they knew how to reconcile, they considered already blessed in the company of the gods, and to have found the gateway to happiness. So it is most certain that Orpheus derived this magic from no other source than the Egyptians, and Homer from him, that it needs no other demonstration except the combination of one doctrine with another. What else are the hieroglyphic inscriptions on statues and obelisks than certain silent hymns designed to attract the power and influences of the gods? But all this will be shown at length in its own place and time. Orpheus, therefore, explains to us in allegorical words what the Egyptians did in their hieroglyphs, so that by the name of the gods to whom hymns are dedicated, he means nothing else than the intellectual governors of the realms, by the ornaments or instruments of the gods, and various bodily postures, and various positions of places with which he describes them, he means nothing else than their various operations and virtues shining forth in the individual members of the world. And by the expert he mystically designates Styrax, manna, saffron, Libanus, Smyrna, poppy seed, and other types of incense, spices, and seeds, appropriated for each deity, nothing else but the ceremony, expiation, and dispositions of the soul required to attract the god who is being sung. For he first introduces Neptune, carried by a chariot, in which indeed he clearly indicated that which the Egyptians expressed hieroglyphically by the eye, scepter, and serpent, that is, the ineffable name of God, which, according to Iamblichus, runs through the universe, and which he had also perhaps derived from Trismegistus, who, because he was the first to worship the ineffable name of God, which he had learned from the early patriarchs, under the unity of the essence of the threefold diffusion of power, was called thrice great, as Suidas testifies by the word Trismegistus. In this manner, therefore, Orpheus brings Neptune, driven by a chariot, displayed under three names, which are night, heaven, and ether, so that by night he comprehends the same thing that the Hebrews do by Ein Sof and Keter, that is, the infinite and the crown, and Trismegistus by the power which among the three divine persons belongs to the loving Father. The sky, however, was born from the night to the beloved sun, and finally to the life-giving spirit, and connecting all things with love. The ether is the bond of worldly body. What else is indicated by the particular gods whom he invokes at the beginning of the hymns, except the power of the divinity diffused through all the members of the world, and distinguished by various operations? But here we attach a specimen for the interpretation. To the firstborn of Saturn, the incense of Smyrna. I call the firstborn, two-faced, great, wandering in the ether, born from an egg, rejoicing with golden wings, having the cry of a bull, of the blessed race, and of mortal men, ineffable, hidden, resounding, shining everywhere, branching of the eyes who shook off the dark cloud, swirling in every direction with the stirring of his wings through the world, shining, leading the pure light, from which I call you phantom. And Priapus, dazzling king, all-seeing, but blessed are the many consorts, having diverse seeds descending joyfully to the holy sacrifice, varied students of the orgy. By Saturn he indicates the intellectual world, which contains angelic minds, pure and separated from all contamination by matter. Hence the Platonists call the first mind the kingdom of Saturn, the author of all resurrection. But he is called the son of earth and heaven, because, as a certain anonymous commentator on this place explains, the angelic nature in the first stage of its creation was in a way formless and obscure, expressed by the opacity of the earth, but being turned to heaven, that is, the divine word, in which all the treasuries of wisdom and knowledge are hidden, and to the beauty of the divine essence from which it had proceeded, struck by the rays of the illumination of ideas, it received its perfection, its essence clothed in splendor and luminous beauty. I, however, think that this can be explained more clearly if we say the angelic nature at the beginning of creation, not yet confirmed in a state of grace, nor blessed by the vision of God, was in a way, if it may be said so, formless, that is, indifferent to good and evil, as is clear from the case of the angels. But soon, through an act of supreme love for God, it received from God all the supernatural perfection due to it, and was thus established in eternal grace. He is said to be always living because Saturn is the intellectual world, the sources are perpetual, and the exemplars of all lives. He is said to be the father of the gods because he contains within himself the ideas of the heavenly bodies, which were called God by the earliest philosophers. He is called the father of men because the human mind is rooted and lives in him by virtue of intellectual unity, and has with him a common source and principle of virtues and intellectual operations. according to Pythagoras. Trust that there is divine seed in men. He is called the begetter of time because the sensible world is like a kind of image and shadow of that perpetual and eternal intellectual world. He is called the begetter of time because the sensible world is like a kind of image and shadow of that perpetual and eternal intellectual world. But let us now explain the hymn of Orpheus cited above a little more fully, in which, however, no one should think I assert anything from my own opinion, but everything from the mind of the most ancient theologians, whose interpreter I act in mind and opinion. He is called dual-formed, because one part of himself, as they say, lives and is united with the purest intellectual unity in the intelligible realm, while the other part is devoted to the governance of the exterior realm. Orthodoxy, however, makes no real division in God, but says that the divine operation is one and undivided, both within and without. He is called great because he encompasses the whole universe within himself. He is called ethereal, or dwelling in the ether, because they say that the spirit of the universe depends on him, which they assert, however incorrectly, to be both the supreme ether and the divine spirit, transforming all things with the holy love of God. He is said to be born from an egg, because the ancients, owing to the analogy of circular motion, likened the intellectual world to an egg, as we have amply demonstrated in the obelisk of Pamphilius, in which the shell represents the firmament, the eggy humour the sidereal space, and the yolk, finally, the elemental world, in which the mixture of seminal reasons lies hidden. Since, therefore, the sensible world is a kind of image of the intellectual world, they appropriately presented a great nature, or a royal soul, born from an egg. He is said to have a bull's voice, because the first portion of this universal soul is perpetually devoted to the formation of matter. Hence, for the same reason, the ancients sacrificed a bull to Neptune, because of the supreme fertility of the marine element, and its perpetual desire for all-encompassing generations, and also because of the sound of the sea, which they called mukuton, not unlike the bellowing of a cow. The golden wings denoted the wisdom of the said soul, for, according to Plato, they are the wings of the hieroglyphs of intelligence, as will be said in its proper place. But gold belongs to that supramundane ideal world, in which all the treasuries of intellectual riches are hidden. The divine and mortal seed are embraced, because in that first soul and its venerable temple all things, both heavenly and elementary bodies, however subject to corruption by themselves and by their nature, are eternal and divine. Understand this as an example. He is said to scatter the clouds, because the first soul itself, in the impression of forms, was said to destroy the dark obscurity of that ancient chaos. He spreads the most holy light in the world, because by the beauty of the things he has formed, he turns minds to the contemplation of the highest good. He is called blessed, prudent, and abounding in counsel, because of the strength, solidity, and fortitude of his contemplation. He abounds in seed, because of the fertile abundance of things which he procreates. Hence he is called, by allegory, Pan and Priapus, that is, the nature of the universe and the great sower of seed, from the same analogy, for the initiation of the Egyptians, who make Horus the same as Pan. Hence, to display him hieroglyphically, they depicted him in human form, with a scepter in his right hand, the symbol of empire over the world under the moon, which he would respectfully hold with his left, to demonstrate panspermia, or all the seeds of things hidden within him, the unique and eternal receptacle of forms desired from matter, according to these words of Orpheus. O Father of the universe and Prince of the world, by which all things are produced, Lucifer, fruitful, Paean, through you the earth has an eternal foundation, and yields to your supreme power all the wavy waters. Hence the same Pan or Horus was seen carved in the Egyptian city of Sai, in a very large colossus under this form. With his right hand he seemed to be scourging the moon. With his left he held an ichthyphallus, that is, an erect phallus, by which indeed they wished to signify nothing else than the very nature of the universe receiving all its fertility from him, by whose help all lower things are produced. But the moon seems to be particularly solicitous as the receptacle of all heavenly influxes. For from this, because of its moisture mixed with heat, nature disposes of a mixture of seminal principles for the generation of things. But concerning these, see the obelisk of Pampilius, in which we have extensively explained the hieroglyphic images of Pan, as well as the images of Horus above in the first volume. So the Orphic mythology, which has been explained in passing, is nothing else than a certain portion of more divine philosophy. What the soul of the world is, what its functions are, what the principles of natural things are, what its movements are, will be more fully explained in the hieroglyphic theology in the 11th class. But he declares in the following verses that he received this philosophy, although corrupted, yet openly, from the ancient Hebrews. You who worship virtue, listen only to my words, set your minds on them. You who despise the holy laws, flee from here. And far from here, you miserable ones, far from here, the profane. But you who contemplate the divine, and with a lofty mind comprehend, embrace the voices of the muse, and gazing upon them with sacred eyes, keep them under your breast. Entering this journey, look only to him, the great author of the world, the only one who's without destruction, whom we teach in this present discourse, who he is, one perfect God, who covers all things, fostering all, bearing all the things above him. Only he who's conceived by the mind, and who's seen by the mind, who never brings any evil upon mortals, who besides him there is no other. See all things here on earth, the best place where you can see him. Here indeed I see his footsteps, his strong hand, but I cannot see who he really is, for he sits in the clouds high. No one has seen him, a descendant of Chaldean blood, whom the bird of the heavens holds in its lofty seat, whose right hand reaches to the ends of the ocean, by whom the mountains tremble from their deepest roots and are shaken, nor, though they are immense in weight, can they bear, who worships the highest peaks of heaven, yet is never absent from the earth. He is the beginning, the middle also, and the same end. The words of the ancients have taught us all these things, which God once delivered to them in 2 tablets, where, by Chaldean, he undoubtedly means either Moses, whom the sacred texts testify spoke to God face to face, or Abraham, whom the sacred text shows to have been endowed by God with a similar prerogative. However, it is more likely that Moses is being designated here, as the last verse about the 2 tablets sufficiently indicates. Furthermore, the hymns of Orpheus were in such high esteem at one time that Picus dared to say that they had the same effect in natural magic as the Psalms of David do in the Kabbalah. And so they agree most closely with the Sephirotic doctrine of the ancient Hebrews and Egyptians, as will be said in its proper place,
where we shall prove by example that all Orpheic hymns are nothing else than a kind of hieroglyphic syntagmata. So that, consequently, moved by the love of this so arduous and sublime philosophy, all the great poets of the following centuries, Homer, Euripides, Hesiod, and all the rest, at one time or another sought to imitate him as a model of symbolic wisdom. And among the other philosophers, Pythagoras, who, as he received most things from the Egyptians and Hebrews, so also borrowed many things from Orpheus, we will abundantly demonstrate in the following symbolisms.